Hi everyone, welcome back. Thank you for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Ryan. When my wife, Rebecca, kept complaining that she never felt turned on, she had no idea what her sister, who was staying with us, would say to her about this complaint, and it left everyone speechless. I met Rebecca, the woman who would later become my wife, through what I like to call an old school setup, something my aunt arranged. It was just a quiet suggestion from a family member who knew us both well enough to think, these two might just work. She told me Rebecca was a good person, level-headed and decent, but also added, almost like a warning, that she was very reserved. Reserved in the sense that she preferred to keep to herself, avoided crowds, and wasn't much for small talk. My aunt even said that her isolated nature was probably why past relationships hadn't lasted long. She didn't go out much, didn't do social stuff, and had trouble connecting with people who expected a bubbly personality. Now, why would my aunt think I was the right person for someone like that? Simple. Because I'm quiet too. I'm not antisocial, but I'm far from a people person. I've always been the kind of guy who'd rather sit at home with a book than go to a party. I can sit next to someone for hours and not say a word, and still feel like we spent quality time together. My family thinks that's weird. And maybe it is, but that's how I've always been. I've never craved excitement or noise. I value stillness. So in my aunt's mind, pairing me with Rebecca made perfect sense. Two quiet people, low maintenance, no drama. I didn't know what to expect when I agreed to meet her. I wasn't nervous, but I wasn't overly eager either. It was just one of those, let's see how it goes kind of situations. We went out for coffee, and honestly, it was a bit awkward at first. We talked, but there were plenty of silent pauses in between. There were moments when neither of us felt the need to force conversation. Some might find that dull. But to me, it felt natural. She didn't try too hard. I didn't either. We both let the moment be what it was. And by the end of that first meeting, we agreed to see each other again. We didn't dive straight into a relationship. We kept things simple. Checked in with each other. Shared little things. Slowly, we built a friendship. For over 6 months, we got to know each other layer by layer. I learned that she liked classical music and couldn't stand reality TV. She found comfort in routines and loved the rain. She learned that I liked long walks without a destination and spent way too much time organizing my bookshelves. As time passed, we began to complement each other more naturally without forcing it. Eventually, I asked her to be my girlfriend. I still remember how hesitant she was, like she wasn't sure she'd be enough for me. She asked, "What if you get bored with me after a month?" I laughed and told her no, that I genuinely liked her because she was her. That was enough for me. We dated for a while. There wasn't a lot of drama. No fiery passion or loud fights. Just quiet affection. Respect. We had family and friends supporting us, people who rooted for our calm kind of love. And when it felt right, we got married. We thought that knowing each other deeply before the wedding would make the transition into marriage smooth, maybe even easy. But we were wrong about that part. There were things neither of us saw coming. I honestly believed that things would shift, especially when it came to intimacy. I thought the comfort we had built while dating, the quiet understanding between us, would naturally grow into something deeper, something more connected, physically and emotionally. We already knew each other well, so I assumed marriage would just make everything smoother. But I couldn't have been more wrong about that. Looking back, I can admit now that even during our dating phase, intimacy was never really strong between us. It wasn't something I wanted to admit at the time, because everything else seemed to line up. But the truth is, whenever we tried to get close, there was always something in the way. If I tried to be affectionate, she'd often stiffen up or pull back. If she tried, it was usually mechanical, like she was trying to check a box. There were always complaints, always some excuse. She was tired, or she had a long day, or her head hurt, or she just wasn't in the mood. At the time, I thought it was just early relationship awkwardness, and we needed more time to build that side of things. So I gave it time. But when we got married, I expected the shift to finally happen. I thought marriage would bring a certain freedom, a new comfort level, that would make us more open with each other, more willing to explore that part of our relationship. I was ready for that, But she wasn't. The same excuses kept popping up. She was exhausted from work, or stressed, or not feeling it. It started to feel like I was asking for something that she simply didn't have to give. And I began to notice just how rare our intimate moments really were. Sometimes once a month. Sometimes not even that. And each time it did happen, it felt like she was doing it like a chore she had to cross off, rather than a moment she actually wanted to share with me. It hit harder because we talked about having kids. We used to say we'd want our home to be full of life. But I couldn't reconcile that dream with the reality we were living. How do you get to that point when you can't even get your wife to want to touch you or be touched? I didn't want to be the guy who nagged or made her feel pressured. So I did what most men in my situation probably do. I tried to fix it quietly. I started reading articles online, watching relationship advice videos, and learning about how to reignite romance. I planned romantic dinners, made reservations at places she liked, tried surprises, and little getaways. Sometimes she appreciated it and smiled, saying thank you. And occasionally, she'd enjoy herself. But most of the time, it didn't lead anywhere. Her idea of bonding was watching something together in silence. Mine was reaching out, hoping she'd meet me halfway. But she rarely did. And the more I tried to fix it, the more I began to wonder if I was the one who needed fixing. Everything changed when Rebecca's sister came to stay with us. It was around the second year of our marriage. At that point, I was still trying to fix what felt broken, hoping maybe time, effort, or patience would make things better. Rebecca had told me one evening that her sister was in trouble. Her marriage had fallen apart, and she needed somewhere to stay for a while. I already knew the stories about her sister's husband. The man she had married wasn't just difficult. He was controlling, loud, and aggressive. The kind of man who thrived on arguments and power games. Everyone in the family had seen the warning signs early on, but there's only so much you can do when someone insists they're fine. Over time, the cracks in her marriage widened, and things got physical. Eventually, even the sister couldn't pretend anymore. So, she left him. After the divorce, she stayed in the apartment she managed to get during asset settlement. But it didn't last under her control for long. The mortgage payments were high, she wasn't making enough, and before long, the bank came knocking. The apartment was foreclosed. She had nowhere else to go. Rebecca had asked softly, "Can my sister stay here for a bit until she figures things out?" I paused and thought about this request, because this would change the rhythm of our home. But I looked at Rebecca, saw the concern in her eyes, and nodded. "Of course," I said. She arrived 2 days later with 2 suitcases. She walked in wearing loose jeans, flip-flops, and a hoodie that swallowed half her frame. We gave her the guest room. She smiled, hugged her sister tightly, and said a quiet thank you to me. I didn't know it at the time, but her presence would set in motion a chain of events I never saw coming. And from that moment on, the energy in the house began to change. My sister-in-law was the complete opposite of my wife, not just in personality, but in how she carried herself, how she talked, how she existed in a room. Where Rebecca was quiet, reserved, and always composed, her sister was the kind of woman who didn't seem to care much for formalities or appearances. She was loud that she filled up a room and made it feel alive. She had this sarcastic sense of humor that caught me off guard at first, but over time, I realized it was her way of making everything feel lighter. She didn't hold back when she had something to say, and you could always count on her to cut through tension with a joke, even if it was at her own expense. Most days, she walked around the house in oversized t-shirts, no bra, completely barefoot. And weirdly enough, it never came off as inappropriate. She didn't care much for what people thought. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just was who she was. To be honest, I didn't expect to bond with her at all. I thought her being in our home would feel awkward, like hosting a guest for too long. But somehow, that didn't happen. We started talking more than I expected. I found myself opening up to her in ways I didn't even realize. She listened. Things had been building up for a while between me and Rebecca. One calm evening after dinner, the house was quiet, and I decided to speak to my wife about it. I needed to understand what had been happening to us, especially in the part of our relationship that once felt promising. even if it had always been fragile. We were sitting in the living room. I sat a few feet away from her, trying to find the courage to say what had been sitting on my chest for weeks. I finally broke the silence and asked, "Can we talk about our bedroom activity?" She didn't look surprised. She already knew what I was about to say and was dreading it. She turned around and said, "Ryan, I don't know what it is." Her voice was low, and her eyes didn't meet mine. Then she added, "I've tried. I really have. But I just don't feel anything anymore when you touch me. It's like my body isn't responding. I don't feel turned on, not by you. Maybe not by anyone." I wasn't expecting this. She looked like she was admitting something she couldn't fix, and didn't know how else to say it. I was stunned. My mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. I didn't even know what to say. But before I could get a word out, I heard footsteps. Then, out of nowhere, her sister, who had been staying with us for almost a year at that point, appeared in the doorway, looked straight at both of us, and said, "Then let me." I froze. At first, I thought I had misheard her, that maybe she was joking in that way. She often did. But the look in her eyes said otherwise. She was dead serious. I turned to Rebecca, waiting for her to react. But she didn't say a word to her. Something now made sense to me. Maybe all those flirty jokes from her sister, calling me handsome, nudging my arm when she laughed, brushing past me a little too close in the kitchen, weren't just harmless play. She probably meant them, and has been waiting for a moment like this all along. We sat there in silence for a while. I glanced at Rebecca once again, hoping to see some emotion on her face, but she looked calm. Then, without raising her voice, she stood up and said, "Let's go to the bedroom." Without explanation or hint of what she was thinking, I followed her quietly. The air between us felt heavier than usual. Once we were behind closed doors, she turned to me and looked me straight in the eyes with raw seriousness. "Are you having something with my sister?" she asked. I told her no. There was nothing going on between her sister and me. Nothing had happened. But even as I answered, I saw doubt in her eyes. She didn't press the issue or accuse me further. She just stared for a moment, as if trying to see past my words and into whatever else I might be hiding. Then, quietly, she walked away. By the next morning, normally, she'd be up early, dressed for work. But that day, as I buttoned up my shirt and grabbed my briefcase, I realized she was still in bed. I asked her if she wasn't going to work. She didn't even look at me while saying she wasn't feeling well. Under the weather, she called it. I didn't question her. I just nodded and told her to get some rest. I didn't see her sister that morning either, but that wasn't unusual. Her sister had a habit of sleeping in late, especially if she'd stayed up all night watching movies or talking on the phone. I assumed she was just still in her room. But when I came home later that evening, the house was quieter. It took me a moment to notice what was different. The hallway was clear. The guest room door was open, and the things her sister brought when she moved in were gone. I called out to Rebecca and asked her what happened. She didn't answer at first, as she kept doing whatever it was she was pretending to be busy with. I asked again, more directly this time. Still nothing. Just silence. Eventually, I figured it out on my own. She had stayed home that day, not because she was sick, but because she wanted to make sure her sister left. She'd waited for me to go, then handled it herself. After her sister left, something in Rebecca changed. Over the next few days, she became more deliberate. She started sitting closer to me on the couch, resting her head on my shoulder while we watched a movie, asking me questions she hadn't asked in months. Those conversations felt unfamiliar because we hadn't spoken this honestly in a long time. For the first time in our marriage, Rebecca was the one trying to close the distance. She told me things and talked about what makes her feel wanted, what kind of moments put her in the mood, what makes her mind and body connect, and what shuts her down. She started suggesting things, and this time she didn't wait for me to lead. There was a softness in her voice that I hadn't heard in a while, like she was finally letting herself be vulnerable with me again. It surprised me, honestly. I didn't think one uncomfortable conversation with a raw, weird, unexpected moment would be the thing that pushed us forward. But it did. I guess hearing her sister say something so blunt and inappropriate snapped something in her. It probably made her see things from the outside or stirred something in her she didn't even realize had gone numb. I don't know for sure, and I didn't ask. Now, things aren't magically perfect, but there's something solid about where we are now. We laugh more. We touch more. We talk about the hard things instead of pretending they'll fix themselves. And when we lie in bed at night, there's no more guessing whether she wants me close. I know, because she tells me and shows me. I'm grateful for this strange, winding journey we took. Without them, we wouldn't have gotten here. I hope in some small way, this reminds someone out there that sometimes connection isn't lost. It's just waiting to be rebuilt, brick by brick.